So let's take another look at our reference image. One thing is that this should be straight, and then we're gonna work on the extrusion for this little piece there. So first, let's go back here to where we have this vertex point, and we want to align that with the one that we have joining at the top. So let's go over here to our vertex mode and let's copy the x coordinates and let's just paste it onto this one. So that way we have this perfectly aligned. So next I want to go back to this piece here, and you can see the pivot is not at the center of it. So let's use our quick origin command so that it's easier for us then to first of all give it a bit of a scale here. And then we want to push it as far as we can without intersecting into the direction here of this element. Next, I'm going to select that face, copy it, snap back and separate it out. Let's also apply the quick origin on it so that it's easier to move. And then under item, we can change our scaling for it. So instead of pushing the vertex around, we can be precise here, and let's try with 0.3 for X and Y. And then let's push it a little bit here to the left side as well as up. So right now it's only a plane, but let's switch over to face mode and let's extrude it. And then we delete that front face that we had selected. So that way we already have it looking like that shape that we want to have here. Let's just give it a bit of a scale here on that face at the back of it. And then if we select everything, we can go over here and bevel it while we are in our face mode. So currently these pieces are intersecting with each other. So what we want to do is go back to that piece and let's connect a few more of these vertex points here. And then we can also increase the resolution on it here on our subdivision. Let's put the viewport to 3. That way we have this more tessellated, and then we can select that piece again. And let's clear the target and let's select this piece here. And then if we put it to difference, we have this intersection taken care of basically. And that way it will bake as a nice detail here on it. So let's push that down a bit, and then we can confirm that Boolean operation, but let's uncheck delete after apply so that we get to keep that other piece here, or both of them. So we could probably leave the modifiers on, but just to make sure that it exports right, I'm gonna confirm that here, the subdivision. And then let's also apply this one here, the Boolean. And now we have to put that here back to solid to actually see it. And now the faces are inverted. Let's select them all and let's flip the normals. So now we can go over here to our orthographic view and give it a bit of a scale here on the y-axis. Maybe push it a little bit to the front. And that way we don't have any intersection here, and that will bake perfectly as this complicated detail into our normal map later on. And that way we didn't have to model it into the actual model, it's just floating geometry. Next, let's take that piece here, let's make a copy of these faces and separate it out. And then we can work on that circular element that we've seen on the reference image. I'm gonna fill it here at the back. And then we can make a ring selection on that part and delete these faces so that we're only left with this one here. And then let's also give it the quick origin so that it's easier for us to work with. I'm gonna scale it down here. I have it around 0.65 on the scaling for that part. And that way you can compare with yours if it's around the same size, but I mean, you see it anyway. And you can always compare to the reference image as well. Let's make an inset on that followed by another inset, and this one we want to push in a bit by pressing Ctrl at the same time. So now we just have to make sure it's not intersecting, and then we can carry on here, pushing it a little bit further in. And I'm gonna have another inset here, followed by yet another one that we push out like that. So that way we already have this detail there in place, this gap, and we can repeat that here. And this part I'm gonna extrude out. So now I'm gonna make another inset and one more to the inside. So while we're at it, let's just do it once more. So that way we have really quickly done some interesting details on it. And now we can give that an inset and collapse it to the center. And let's apply the bevel modifier here on it. Let's close it. And then let's put the threshold of the offset to around 0.1. And let's add a subdivision surface to it. So that way we have it already high poly. Now I'm gonna copy this element, snap it back into place, and let's put it to Z0. That way we already have it at the center here. And then we can adjust it a bit by growing that selection here 2 times, convert it to face, and delete that surrounding edge loop here. Now let's go to vertex mode and also grow that selection here. And then if we collapse it, we have a new surface that we can grow 1, 2, 3 times like this here and scale it down to the center. So now let's select that vertex again and let's grow and scale it down here so that this is a bit more smooth here. Now I'm going to select this edge loop and I want to push it a little bit here to the front. So that way we have a bit more of an angle there, and then I'm going to bevel it 2 times here. So that way this object already looks like our reference and we were basically recycling it. Didn't have to do it all from scratch. I'm just going to scale it down a bit more and bring it closer here to our target object, where we're going to project the bake on later. So let's take a look at the reference image for this small piece here. And it might be very small, but nevertheless, it's an iconic thing that these revolvers have. For that, I actually changed my mind here on this region. Let's delete that and let's fill it again. And then let's connect these vertex points like that here. At first I thought it's better to have it the other way around, but this here makes it easier then to add this detail. Let's connect these vertex points here like that. And now let's add a cylinder to our scene. Let's give it 5 mm radius and a depth of, let's give it 60. So we can then rotate that around here on the y-axis. And then let's go to the JMesh tool. Let's also shade smooth it, because otherwise sometimes we have problems with the shading if we do the Boolean. And now I'm gonna put it to difference here for that. It doesn't do anything yet, but basically the Boolean is already active. And then we can go into top perspective and scale it over here. I have it, I think, at 35 degrees. Let's also rotate it here from the front, and it requires a little bit of fine tuning. I'm gonna go over to our local mode here for the pivot, and that makes it easier then to drag it like this here. So it might require a few attempts, but now you can see we have this detail here, and we can then go over and apply that. Also say delete after apply. And that way we have quickly created this detail. And all that's left for us to do is connect these vertex points and basically clean it up. This is always the essential job after Boolean operations, same as in 3D Max or any other software for that matter. So we just have to make sure that our topology and edge flow is nice. Let's also do that here on that segment. And here, this edge, I'm just gonna delete it or dissolve. Don't need to have too many edges there. This is already clear enough, this detail. I'm gonna also get rid of this edge here and then connect it like that. So that way it's a bit easier to read here in terms of edge flow. And this one, let's connect it over like that, and this one down here. So now we have a combination of this detail here being part of the mesh, and the other ones we're just gonna bake straight into the normal map, so we don't need to add it into the actual 3D model. So now let's shift our focus here to these areas where we have a bit of this frame as well as a bevel, at least on one of these sides. So in order to do that, we have to make sure that our edge flow that we have here under it is as good as it can be for what we're about to do here. So let's select these vertex points and let's bring that whole edge down here a bit. And I want to align this one here. Let me undo that and let's go over here to that vertex point and let's copy the Z coordinates and then let's select it. It's gonna select it on both sides if we are in an X-ray mode, and let's paste that into it. So that way we have this already aligned. And then let's just hide everything aside from this piece, just so that it's easier for us here to work on this area. So I'm gonna delete these edges, or I should say dissolve. And then let's connect it here like this so that we don't have so much edges in the way as we work on it. So now I wanna select these faces and separate them out. And the reason for that is that we're gonna now select these two here and let's give it a nice bevel. So I'm gonna have 7 segments, and this edge here at the bottom, it doesn't really add anything to the silhouette, so I'm gonna dissolve it. Now I'm gonna join it back together, go to our vertex mode, select everything, and then as usual, let's merge by distance. You can see in my case it removed 7 vertices. And now we can zoom into this area. I'm gonna delete the upper face. And now let's select the whole loop and let's fill it. Now here on that side, we can do the same thing. We delete that upper face, and with Alt, we select the whole edge loop and then we fill it. So we can then later connect that better, but for now, let's keep it all sort of like work in progress without too many connections. I'm just gonna pull that down here for as long as we work on it. Maybe later we can pull it back up, but just so that we have this area clear here for our work. I'm gonna add a subdivision and bring that loop over here already in place for this detail that we see here on the reference. And then let's go over to our knife tool. And this is essentially just a matter of seeing what we have in the background and then following that silhouette here. So let's make sure we have enough curvature, and then let's press enter to confirm that. And we can already go ahead and on these ones, let's already add some vertex connections. So that way we don't have any overlapping or problems. And then we can continue here. It's a little bit hard to see maybe where it ends, but what I want to do is select this vertex where that roughly is, and then we select the one at the bottom and press J and join all the way through it. So now that I think about it, I want to select this edge and lead it up to here and get rid of this loop because it doesn't really do much. And let's just get rid of it basically. Next, let's start here, and from there on we select these faces all the way to where we connected it up there. And then let's make a copy of it with Shift D. Snap it back into place, and then let's separate that. So now we can select this piece here, and what that allows us to do is extrude it out now on that selection. Simply use extrude. Sorry, I know I don't have the shortcut thing on, I forgot, but it will be back on in a moment. And then we can select this edge here, and let's just bring it up here as close as we can to where it's supposed to connect. And then what we want to do is select this object here. Let's go over to vertex mode, and then in our transparency mode we want to use our cut tool, our knife tool, and let's add a line all the way up here. We can press C to make it a straight line, and then hit enter up here, press C again, so that we have a perfect cut here leading all the way up there. Let's just connect that, and then let's take it into isolation mode, and let's switch over here to our face mode. And then let's delete these faces. And then let's also make a selection here for these faces, which are pretty much under that object that we were just copying out and adding depth to. Let's get out of the isolation view, and here you can see this is the underlying face geometry. Let's delete it so that we're left here with that piece only. But before we merge it, we also want to get rid of the faces that we currently have on it here at the back side of it. So we want to delete that. And then let's also get rid of these lines here, or these faces, as well as this here. And then also we can get rid of these faces. So we just prepare it to properly merge it here with this. So now we have a bit of an open gap there, but we're gonna take care of that in just a moment. Let's also go over here to that part, and we have to use our cut tool to also make a proper connection here. Let's delete that face. Let's get rid of that face as well here. So now we can select this piece here again, and we want to enable our snapping. I have both vertex and edge enabled, but vertex alone should already be enough for what we're about to do. Now we can zoom in here, and then we want to snap these vertices here into place where they belong. So here in that case, let's add some extra vertices to it. Control B as well as V like Victor, because otherwise we wouldn't have enough vertices there to connect them all. So the ones that we have, let's connect them. And here, let's snap it like that. So now we have this element here pretty much set up to merge it together with our other object. All the vertices are in place. Let's join it with Ctrl J and then merge by distance. So that welds that together here. Just double check that everything looks fine. And then we have this open gap here. So let's get out of the snap mode. And then with Alt, we can fill that here. And then we can connect it. But first I want to dissolve these edges here. These three edges, they don't really add anything to it. And then let's see how we connect that here in the best way. Let's connect it up here to that corner to the right. And we can also make use of this one here. So that way we have this properly connected. And then let's take a look at it here from that side where we can also make some connections. So this is always an important task to make sure everything has its connections, and this is pretty much the optimization that we already do in advance so that we don't have to do it later. So maybe we want to snap this vertex up to that one. But on a second thought, let's undo it so that this face under it, the big one, doesn't have any distortion. Actually, let's take this vertex here and let's dissolve it so that we have the whole right space there available to make these connections. Let's focus on this here first, that part, and let's make these connections, and then let's also do that over here. So this is a little bit the mundane part of the work. There's often not really much that I can think of saying in such a case when we do these connections, since those are the repetitive steps. But you know, I'm always trying to say something about it, even if sometimes it might sound a little bit repetitive. So now we can continue up here and make use of this free space that we have now. Before we had this edge going through there, and I think it's better that we cleared that up, and that way we can make maximum use here of the vertex points that we have on the left as well as on the right side. Let's connect this one here as well, and then once we have this one connected, let's go to face mode and let's make an inset on it, and then we press M and collapse that, and then we can snap this vertex point here down there, and that way we have already the connection done for the remaining ones. So we have to also do it here on that side. Let's dissolve this edge, and then let's carry on by making these vertex point connections. And I want to dissolve this here. Don't really need that. Same for these here. Let's connect it like that and then dissolve these two edges. So this is where we already think a bit about our optimization again. Or not only a bit, everything we do is already with optimization in mind. So that later we pretty much already have our low poly, and we're gonna build our high poly on top of the same model pretty much that we also use as a low poly. Simply by turning on or off our modifier stacks with a remeasure, we can switch pretty much between low and high poly. So we're gonna get to that later, of course. For now, we're still gonna be busy here working on our models. And here we also have our connections done now on that side. And let's select everything and merge by distance. And then we have a few more things left over here. This is just something we have to do uniquely on both sides because it's not symmetrical anymore. Otherwise, we could have just done it on the left side and then used the mirror modifier. But since we have a different mesh flow there on the other side, we can't simply do that. So we have to treat it uniquely here as far as this is concerned. So now let's get working on this part here. And I want to select these faces here. Let's take this one there as well. And then let's extrude it. Let me get out of the snap mode. We already did the extrusion. Now we can drag it out. And let's do it a little bit further than the other one that we pulled out there. And let's drag these vertex points up and this one here down so that we have this natural flow there. So let's also think about this edge here. Let's go to the bottom and same here. We gotta pay attention to that silhouette and we only have that on the right side here. I want to also, while I look at it, pull these edges in a bit. Also considering our edge flow. Next, I want to create a cylinder here. And let's put it to 6.5 millimeter radius. And let's rotate it around here on the x-axis, 90 degree. And let's put the depth to around 20. So we're gonna be using that in a moment. But first we have to do a bit more cleanup work here. If you zoom in here, you can then go to edge mode and let's select this whole loop, convert it to face mode. And now we see that we have some intersection there. So let's delete everything and then let's use our fill on this loop. We're gonna connect this all a bit better later, but now let's unhide some of what we already created and let's isolate these two parts here. And the reason for that is that we are about to create this piece that swings to the side together with a cylinder. Let me show you here on the reference image, this element here. And you can see it has a bit of this dot there. And this is exactly at the same spot where this cylinder currently is sticking through. So what we want to do is select this front face here of it. Let's copy it out and then let's separate it as a selection. Now we can take this here and use our quick origin on it so that it's easier for us to move it around. And now let's bring it a bit down here on the z-axis. So basically it's right under that cylinder. And let's drag that up. Or I should say scale it up. And then same as we did before, we want to make some floating detail out of it. So I'm gonna be using the inset here together with control to add some depth. And then we are just gonna repeat this action here a few times. I'm really liking this inset workflow. Let's just collapse that. And then let's bevel this here a bit more so that this looks like a sphere where it sort of like clicks in when this element falls back into place later. Let's add a subdivision to this loop followed by another one, and then we can select that loop and push that further in. So that way this looks more like it's coming out of it, out of this depth. And here let's also make two subdivisions and then select this one and do the same thing here at the top. So we just have to make sure it's not intersecting, but that it's as close to the surface as possible for it to bake properly later. Now let's add our bevel here. Let's close that. And then same as before, we have to put the threshold down. Let's see here with 0.1. That should be smooth enough. And then let's add our subdivision surface on top. So that way this is nice and smooth. And this is basically this detail here that we are looking at there on the reference image. And now let's make a copy of that. Let's bring it down and then we make a copy of it and we put it here where we have this cylinder already in place, and let's scale it up a bit. So that way it looks like this cylinder is actually coming out of that. We have some normal map information there behind it. So let me just hide these elements that we have here on top, the rail and the front side. Let's keep it here only to these. And then let's continue here with that cylinder that we created. Let's drag that down here. And just in case, I'm gonna show you here where I have that. So I'm gonna put it to Z minus 27. And then I wanna drag it over here to the right side, but let's leave a little bit of space there. So now let's take these faces that we have here on the top. In that case, I have 6 faces selected, and then let's extrude it up like that here. Straight on the Z-axis, and let's align it. And then let's pull that up here. Or actually, let's go to the front view and drag this around here. And then let's extrude out a new segment so that we already have an edge loop there in place around here. So now we can select this face and also extrude it out to the left side. So we want to make sure that the edge on the left is covering that space of this floating detail that we created at the bottom. Let's put this down here, these vertex points. And we're just gonna do the rough shape before we do the bevel. Let's also select these 2 faces and extrude it. If you want, you can compare my transformation stats here on the upper right. But you know, as long as it's close enough, that should be fine. Let me bring that up and a little bit further down again, because I don't want to have any intersection here. It becomes a bit more clear in the moment, but now I just want to go over and dissolve these edges that we don't really need here. So only these ones here at the front, and then let's dissolve that. And also these ones here don't really contribute anything. So by getting rid of them makes it easier for us then to do our bevel. Let's also get rid of that here. So now we can select these target points here, or edges is the more accurate term. And let's bevel that here. Let's keep it simple on that one. And let's just compare it here with this floating element where we already have a circular shape. And let's aim to make that sort of like parallel to each other with a little bit more space in between. So this one, I'm gonna actually push up a bit. I wanna have a bit of an angle here on that face so that it actually makes sense that it would open up easily once we do the Boolean operation then in a moment. So let's make that also round here with 3 segments. And then this one here, let's just have 2 segments on it to continue that path here. And now we're gonna leave it like that for the moment. We're gonna come back to it soon enough. So now let's enable the snapping. And you can see here, I have both vertex and edge enabled. If you press Shift, you can select multiple. Sorry for this small segment, I forgot to put that key action plugin on, but basically now we can snap it against these edges here on the other element. Now let's actually also select that here, the bigger element, and let's make a selection here for these edges only. And let's do a subdivision through it. And then with this loop that we just added, let's align it so that it's perfectly aligned here on the Z-axis. Let's bring that down to where we have it on the reference image. This transition there. And then let's connect these vertex points here so that this is already in place. Now, before we actually do this Boolean action, let's take care of a few more things here in preparation for that. And one thing we want to do is, first of all, dissolve these 2 edges to make a bit more space. And then let's give this here a bevel. And I'm gonna have 4 segments, and let's make it so that these vertex points are meeting there at the top. So once we have that, we can connect it here like this. And now let's join it here. Let's adjust that a bit, and then we can also join these vertex points. And I'm just going to get rid here of these edges, dissolve them. And let's connect it down here as well. So that way we have a bit of a bevel there, as we also see it on our reference image. And I want to continue by collapsing that here. And actually, let's dissolve this vertex here entirely. And then we can just join everything over here to that corner. And the same here for this vertex point. Let's connect it like this. And now let's make another selection here on these, and let's add a subdivision. Let's connect that here, and then on that subdivision we're gonna select these edges, and we want to give it a bit of a bevel here simply by pushing these edges up. Now we can connect this here down also to that vertex point. So that way we added a bit of a step there as seen on the reference image. And now let's zoom in and let's push that a bit here to the right so that we have more of a continuous curve there. So next, let's go back here to this element. And before we do the Boolean, let's bring up that element here, basically the outer part of our barrel, the front barrel. And now let's drag it down like that and pay attention here to the left side. We want that not to intersect but be a bit under it here. So here on that side you can see this is aligned. We have a bit of a flickering there, which is normal because these faces are directly over each other. Now let's take that into isolation again. And then before we do the Boolean, let's just clean that up a bit here in preparation of that. For that, I'm gonna just dissolve these edges here. Let's take the whole loop here and get rid of it in the center. And now we can go over to our JMesh. And then let's select the right operator. It was already in place. And now we're gonna hit slice. So with that, we can already preview how it's going to look like by selecting this element here before we apply it. So we can also check the other, and you can see it looks great on both of them. So now we can select that and then apply, and also delete after apply. That leaves both of these pieces here in place. And now what we can do here is go to the interactive tools. Let's select this edge here, which is exactly in the center if you look at that circle, together with the other. And that way we have the quick origin perfectly in the center of this circle. And that's going to be important because that allows us here to rotate it around like that later on together with the cylinder. So that way we already have that pivot in place now. And now let's take that back into isolation. And as usual, after a Boolean operation, we have a bit of cleanup to do here. Quite a bit of a mess, but we're gonna fix it as easy as we can do. Let's start here on the top by selecting these two. And let's hit J to join it over there. And now the way I think we should approach this is by going over here into the left ortho view, and then with face mode we're going to select everything at the front and simply delete all these faces. So that way it's just easier for us to see all these vertex points, which we can then simply dissolve. So basically every vertex point that's not attached to an edge, we're going to simply get rid of. We can also select them all together here by pressing Shift. So just make sure to select these vertex points that we have pretty much there laying on top of these edges, but not where we have a connection. we then dissolve that. So now we can make a loop selection here for this and fill it. And then let's go and have a look here at the other side. Let's also make a face selection like that here. And let's do the same thing here where we simply delete it. And then same thing as before. Let's dissolve these vertex points, and we don't have that issue too much here on that side. But these ones here, let's just also get rid of that. Only here at the end. The other ones are forming a curve, so we need to keep them at the right side. But where we have that perfect straight line up, we can dissolve that. So I'm gonna select this here. Oh, and we have a few more here before we can fill it back up. Gonna dissolve that, and now if we press Alt, you can see everything got selected. We can fill it, and then we can properly connect that. Let me zoom in here, and this whole edge loop, we can simply dissolve it. It doesn't really contribute much. And we already have an edge loop right under it. Now I want to do these vertical selections here on these vertex points. And some people are probably gonna be concerned like, oh, there's a triangle. It's not a perfect quad. It's not a problem. It's gonna bake perfectly fine later on our normal map. And this is really all that matters. And speaking of this, let's actually connect it like that here. Let's join these and dissolve this edge. I think that looks a bit better. So now let's also do that here. I'm gonna simply do an inset and collapse it. And then with the snapping enabled, let's put it up here to that corner, and bam. We already have all our connections done simply with one inset. For this one here, I want to manually do it. Let's connect it like that here. And now here on that side, it's all flat. So now we can go over here to this X-ray mode, and we select 2 vertex at each time and press J. And that way we make connections horizontally here like that. Since it's perfectly flat, it doesn't really matter how we connect it, as long as we don't have any overlapping. This is all that matters. And now let's join it. Let me undo that. Let's join it like this here. And let's just do these here individually. Now, for that one here, let's just also do it. I could just do the inset technically, but since I'm already at it, let's just do that manually here like that. So that way we have this connected here. Let's take another look around. We also have our pivot in place, and maybe we want to connect this here like that and dissolve this edge. So now let me just select all the vertex points, and let's see if I still have to weld anything. And yeah, one vertex was still somewhere overlapping, and it's now welded. And now let's focus on this piece again. So I'm gonna disable the snapping, and I want to bring this here down like that. So now let's dissolve these edges. And then also the ones here on that side. Let's just get rid of it. Dissolve. Let's isolate this whole piece here. And of course, since we did a Boolean, we also have some cleanup work to do here. So let's zoom in, and then these vertex points that are already connected to an edge, we're gonna join, and now we can get rid of this one here. So now let's connect this over here to the right side, to this point, by pressing J, and we're gonna clean that up here in a moment, what's left of it on the left side. But let's take a quick look here at the reference and how this bevel there shapes up. That is basically what we are preparing now. And let's just select everything here on top and we're gonna simply delete it. So that leaves us here with that face, which we can also delete for convenience. And here on that side, let's delete this face that was sort of like sticking out there. I'm gonna dissolve this vertex here, and then we can press Alt to select them all together here. Press F to fill, and now we can start by joining it. It should be a flat surface wherever it starts here. These vertex points and everything that's on the right side is one flat surface, and that's basically where we can then take it from and connect it. So that way we have this gap there, this little step, and then maybe on this part here we're gonna be using the inset to speed it up a bit. Let's collapse this and then let's snap that. Just gotta enable the snapping. Let's snap that over here and then select everything and merge by distance, and 3 vertex points got merged. So now let's focus here on this area. So for instance, these vertex points, I want to join it. Let's dissolve this one and then we can join these vertex points here like that. And these ones here, let's just connect it here first, same as here. And then we can dissolve the edges once we're done doing these connections here. So let's carry on. Let's connect that, and now let's select these edges here and we dissolve it. So that way we have this cleaned up here on that part, but now I want to dissolve this edge here, which is kind of in the way, and it's better to connect it like that here. So that way we have more space here to the left side to connect these points that we already have in place here. This one, I'm gonna dissolve it. And let me think about how to best do that. Let's also dissolve the one on the top. And that way we have some more space here to join that together. Let's connect that. I think this looks better now. And then only a few more left here. So these ones here, I also want to connect that. Let's continue here by dissolving some of these edges, and then we can make better connections here. So here we have another case of an edge that we can dissolve after we connected it like that here. And then it's really just selecting and pressing J. We're doing that quite a lot here throughout the tutorial, and that's just an important thing to do, or otherwise we get some triangulation issues and some overlapping. So this is why we always have to do that, and this is also already a part of our optimization. So let's take another look around. And then here at the front, I want to also connect that up to the corner here. And maybe this one we take over there. And then we have a few more left here. And now we're almost through. Okay, now let's take another look around. And earlier we were working here on that area. Let's prepare that to make it also more optimized. First, let's select these vertex points here to the corner on both sides. And then with Alt, we can then make the whole loop and dissolve it. And here on that case, let's select this edge all the way through here, these 4 edges, and let's dissolve that. And then let's also join it over here. And also here on that side. So now let's take this piece up and let's undo that. I'm still in snap mode, which leads to problems. Without snap, we can just push it up again. And then what we can do is add some of these details here, and we're just gonna do that as floating details. For that, we're gonna make use of this element here. Let's copy it, snap back in place, and then we're just gonna use this copy here. Let's rotate that around 90 degrees. And then let's position that here according to our reference image, which might be a little bit hard to see through all these edges, but it's right behind this other element. It's a little bit hidden under it, you could say, if you look at the reference image. But we're gonna bake it based here on this floating element. And maybe we want to select this edge here. Let's get out of the subdivision mode so that we're seeing better what we're doing. I'm gonna push that up a bit more to the front. And then here I'm gonna dissolve some of these edges or edge loops. And this one I wanna drag in. So that way this element looks a bit more how I think it looks like based on the reference. And then we also have some of these screws here that we can work on. For that, let's just make another copy here of this element and let's make a screw out of that. Hey guys, I'm just gonna put a quick freeze frame here because these screws that we were just having a look at on the reference picture and that I am about to show you how to create here, you don't necessarily have to follow this because later I decide that it's better to delete them. So basically once we're at the end of the Blender modeling, I decide let's delete them again because it's easier to do them in Substance Painter. So I didn't want to cut that part out because I already recorded it and I will still comment on it. But if you want, you can just basically fast forward through these parts where we create these specific screws here because we're not gonna export them later. So just letting you know. So step 1 would be to select these loops here. And then we simply dissolve that. Same as this one here. And that leaves us basically with only this one loop. Let's chamfer that, or I should say bevel, since we're in Blender. And then let's just dissolve this vertex point and we're gonna make a connection here perfectly straight through one of these lines. Now what we can do is select this loop here, but only for these inner edges, and let's bevel that. So then let's select these faces here, also only in the inside, and then let's delete it, not dissolve but actually delete, and then we're gonna fill it back up. And then let's select these vertex points here at the bottom and at the top and let's join it. So that way we already have this dent there. Now let's just drag that a bit here to the front so that we don't have an intersection, since this is supposed to bake onto our normal map. That's why we must not have any intersection there. And now I'm just going to delete the outer edge loop and scale this one up here a bit to get some more depth out of it. So let's put on our modifiers here, bevel and subdivision. That way we make it high poly, and now let's just drag it over to the other side because that's where we really want to have it. It's not where we constructed it. We want to place it here on that side. So now we can go over here to our X-ray mode and let's put on that other reference image so that we see where these screws are actually located. So one thing we can do is give it a bit of a tilt to make that more interesting. And then we have to give it a bit of a scale here to make that match. And in that case, let's scale it down, and then we're gonna have a copy of it, and we can also change the angle here, the rotation. And this one is a bit smaller even. So let's scale that down. And I'm gonna give these outer edges a bit of a pull so that we have more of an edge there, which basically means we have more normal map information. And let's do the same thing here. So now let's bring that as close to that surface here as possible, where later this is gonna bake on. And I already gave you the heads up, we're actually gonna delete these screws, but consider it just practice if you followed it. This part here, however, we're definitely not gonna delete, so let's carry on here with this piece now. So this element is basically what's stopping the cylinder from endlessly scrolling. And let's do an inset here on these faces, and then let's align it like that here on the Z-axis. And then let's get rid of these edges. Let's dissolve them. I'm gonna connect that like this here. And you know what? Let's also dissolve these edges here, as well as connecting these two vertex points here. Make an edge connection. Now let's get back here to these, and I want to drag this edge over. We can see it there on the reference image. We want to be close enough to it, and then let's go to the top view and let's position it so that our gizmo is pretty much here in the center where we have this edge. Doesn't have to be 100% perfect, but that way we defined the perfect center of it here. Then we can scale it like this here. And let me just enable our cylinder that we have here. So that way we can align it a bit better here. Scale it so that it's a bit smaller than the teeth we have on the cylinder. And then once we have that, let's hide the cylinder. And let's just extrude to the inside. So let's do that. And then with that face that we have there at the bottom, we can make a duplicate of it, Shift D, and separate it out. And this is then going to be our basis for this tiny piece. So now let's select that face here and let's extrude it out. And then we can go over and give it a bit of a squeeze here, since it's a separate element. And now we want to select these edges and give it a proper bevel here. So I'm gonna give it 4 segments. And let's select the upper vertex points and bring it down a bit. I'm actually gonna, based on our reference image, push it a bit here to the right side as well as this here. And that way we have taken care here of this element as well. And that's just gonna add to our overall realism here. Let's go back, select our reference image plane, and let's put on the original reference, because next we're gonna be working on our grip